Racial comments. Bill Clinton, after Iowa, said, oh, well, he's going to do okay in South Carolina. Jesse Jackson won South Carolina. Hillary Clinton says, well, Martin Luther King Jr., you know, it's just speeches after all, you know. It's just speeches. It took a president, you know, to make those speeches real. Jabbing at the legacy of one of the most famous Americans in the Black community, if not the most famous.
On this spectacular evening, on this beautiful night, it's important for us to remember the history behind this site. It was over 200 years ago that a group of patriots gathered in this city to do something that no one in the world believed they could do. After years of a government that didn't listen to them, or speak for them, or represent their hopes and their dreams, a few humble colonists came to Philadelphia to declare their independence from the tyranny of the British throne. The union they created has endured for 2 centuries, not because we're perfect, but because we've always been perfectible. Because each generation of Americans has been willing to stand up and sacrifice and do what is necessary to inch us closer to the ideals at the core of our founding promise. Equality. Hello, 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 hello.
Restitution, or the lack of it. And what deepens the chasm of race is the lack of dignity, the lack of remembering, and the willingness to move on, or to try to move on, without restitution. He says that mechanisms of restitution can come together by fixing crumbling schools and dealing with health care and employment. In other words, he's telling us that rather than simply posing individual responsibility as the way out, that collective responsibility is also in the game. Collective responsibility is also extremely important for people who don't have the resources to manage individual responsibility as they would. All of us can do some individual responsibility, but the positive choices have to be there. While not at Memphis to commemorate the death of Dr. King, Obama said from Indiana that the problem was that we have to have in politics, we have had a politics that's too small for the magnitude of the problem. That race has been used to drive us apart, and that unity is necessary to achieve the future needs of people.
On this spectacular evening, on this beautiful night, it's important for us to remember the history behind this site. It was over 200 years ago that a group of patriots gathered in this city to do something that no one in the world believed they could do. After years of a government that didn't listen to them, or speak for them, or represent their hopes and their dreams, a few humble colonists came to Philadelphia to declare their independence from the tyranny of the British throne. The union they created has endured for 2 centuries, not because we're perfect, but because we've always been perfectible. Because each generation of Americans has been willing to stand up and sacrifice and do what is necessary to inch us closer to the ideals at the core of our founding promise. equality. Hello, 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 hello.
Newt Gingrich. Speaking at the American Enterprise Institute, March 31, just a few days ago, as a matter of fact, he acknowledged the anger. He started out, it was a great speech starting out. He acknowledged the anger, and he used a quote from Faulkner. He said, "The past isn't dead and buried. In fact, it isn't even the past." And he also cited John F. Kennedy, who said, "Our task is not to fix the blame for the past, but to fix the course for the future." Well, that's somewhat questionable because the past is related to the future. Most places, you can't fix the future if you ignore the past. So even though it's John F. Kennedy, I think he's wrong. Gingrich proposed to have an honest discussion about race. And you always hear this. Let's have an honest, frank discussion about race. And then he went on to do what? To reject the idea that institutional racism is related to bad schools. He went on to reject the assertion that legalized discrimination helps to explain the income and wealth gap between blacks and whites. He rejected the idea, the fact that many communities, like Detroit, are poor because the economic infrastructure went to China. And then he said that, and I'm quoting, "Nearly every one of the Kerner Commission report recommendations on the causes of the riots was wrong." And he wants an honest discussion about race. The problem, he said, is bad culture in black communities and big government. They're the main problem. Bad culture and big government. He said this solution would require fundamental cultural change. And he talked about Bill Cosby and how Bill Cosby has been trying to tell people that bad culture is a problem. And he said small government without taxes really is the issue here. This, I must say, is a bankrupt ideology. Now, I say it's bankrupt because when you look at the expanse of the last 2.5 decades and ask yourself, what has this ideology fixed? What has it fixed? It hasn't fixed anything. It certainly hasn't brought about racial reconciliation. It certainly hasn't been the force which has made possible the progress of the black community. And so I call it bankrupt. In conclusion, I would like to say that when Barack Obama says it's time to turn the page, it suggests that this is an era-changing moment. Now that's the possibility that I think that we have here. I think when we look at the conservative movement, we look at the detritus of Iraq, we look at the bankruptcy in social policy, we have to say that this is something that has crashed and burned. And that one of the reasons the American people are saying that, with their vote, is that this is a time to change course. This is an era-changing moment. And the leadership is out there to do that. The racial attitudes, I think, have become a part of that era-changing moment. Because that was the point of this speech on race. It was to put it up there along with health care, the Iraq War, and the other big questions that need to be changed in American society. And so if this is going to be an era-changing moment, it seems to me then that my discussion of memory justice is quite appropriate. And so the task is not to move beyond race. If we know anything about memory and the politics of memory, that is impossible. It is to move with race. America is becoming one of the most racially diverse societies, large racially diverse societies. And we have a task